Hi, everybody. You are in for a really special treat. I just found one of my kids' favorite books when they were growing up, and we had a cassette tape. You might not even know what that is, so you might have to ask somebody what a cassette tape is. But it's a little square device, and it has stories and music on it, and you put it in a cassette player. And this one's called Miss Fannie's Hat. And if I had the cassette tape, I would just play it because the woman who read it did such an amazing job. I won't come close to that, but I hope you enjoy it anyway. Miss Fannie has a lot of hats, and each one is her favorite. When she wears her red felt with a big feather, she looks in the mirror and says, "I just love this hat." And her friends at church say, "Miss Fannie, we just love that hat." When she wears her green velour with the fancy pin, she says, "I sure do love this hat." And her Sunday school teacher says, "Miss Fannie, I sure do love that hat." But when she wears her famous pink straw with silk roses, she always says, "I really love this hat." And everyone else loves it too. Miss Fannie is 99 years old and very small. In fact, she's grown to be about the same size she was as a little girl. Miss Fannie and her daughter, Miss Wanda, live together. Miss Wanda makes breakfast every morning. "Don't make me much breakfast," said Miss Fannie, sitting on the sofa in her robe. Miss Wanda tries to mind because Miss Fannie's her mama. But she forgets and brings her a piece of sausage, buttered toast with jelly, a scrambled egg, and a cup of herb tea. "Oh my, that's way too much," Miss Fannie always says. But then she goes ahead and eats it all up. There's Miss Wanda making the breakfast. And there they are enjoying their breakfast. Every morning after breakfast, Miss Fannie reads her Bible. She has worn out 3 Bibles, reading them over and over. Her very favorite verse is, "With God, all things are possible." Every Saturday, Miss Wanda washes Miss Fannie's hair. Miss Fannie takes off her robe and stands around in her slip, looking very thin. Then she gets on a stool and sticks her head in the sink. Miss Wanda runs the warm water and puts the shampoo on her mama's head and scrubs until it lathers up. Then she scrubs some more. "That feels good," said Miss Fannie. After she washes her mama's hair, Miss Wanda rolls it up in tight little curls all over her head. The curlers are real hard to sleep in, but Miss Fannie doesn't care one bit. She knows that when she goes to church the next day, she will look beautiful. On Sunday morning, Miss Fannie puts on a pretty dress and high heel shoes. She puts on earrings and necklaces and lipstick and blusher and powder. Next, Miss Wanda combs out her mama's hair, which is all nice and soft and gray, like the feathers of a dove. Do you see what the cats are wearing? Isn't that funny? They got into her hat box, put on hats. Hats on cats. Then, finally, after all that fussing with her hair, she goes and hides it under a hat. Miss Fannie has 3 black hats, 2 red hats, 1 green hat, 2 white hats, 2 navy hats, 3 beige hats, 1 brown hat, and the famous pink straw with roses. Because she never wears the same one twice in a row, some people think she has a whole closet full of hats, which of course she does. Have you ever heard of the color beige before? It's almost like white, like a dirty white, kind of. That's a beige hat. She said she had 2. There's one and there's the other. Beige. Say it, beige. Kind of a funny word to say. One Sunday, Miss Fannie's handsome young preacher came up to her and said, "Miss Fannie, would you kindly give us one of your beautiful hats? It will go in the auction to fix up the church in time for Easter." That same day, Miss Wanda helped her mama get out her hats and put them on the bed and the dressing table. Then Miss Fannie closed her bedroom door. "Lord," she said aloud, "I'd appreciate it if you'd help me make the best choice." She always talked to the Lord as if he was right there. Because he really is. Uh-oh, the cat has a hat on again. So she put them all out and she asked God to help her pick the right hat. Oh boy. A lot of hats to choose from. It's going to be a hard decision. Then, oopsies, 2 pages stuck together. Miss Fannie walked around the room and looked at each one of her hats. The green velour with the fancy pin was very, very old and still very beautiful. During the terrible flood of 1916, she had crossed the swollen river on a ferry to visit her mother and father. As she stood at the rail holding on to her beautiful hat, a house had floated by, almost close enough to touch. See, she's remembering. And over there was her wide-brimmed felt with the gleaming black feather. Ha! That feather had come from the tail of a hawk that was trying to kill her hens and biddies. She had grabbed the hawk around the neck, and before you could say, "Doodly squat," that hawk would never bother her chickens again. Can you say doodly squat? Doodly squat. Oh, all these hats have such good memories for her. Then Miss Fannie picked up the hat made of soft brown velvet and stroked it. It had always reminded her of Flower, her grandmother's cow. When Miss Fannie was just 7 years old, she had started milking the brown, velvety, soft Flower. Each evening she carried the milk to the spring in a bucket and set it in the icy water to keep cool. Later, her mama would pour the milk into a churn, and Miss Fannie would churn it into butter just like you buy in the store, except better. She realized that each one of her hats was like a friend, and each one brought back special memories. Finally, Miss Fannie came to her most favorite hat of all, the pink straw with silk roses. She had worn it every Easter Sunday for 35 years, and it always made her feel brand new, like Easter itself. But she wasn't the only one who thought it was special. Everyone at church looked for her pink hat on Easter Sunday, just as they looked for the tulips and daffodils to bloom in the spring. He is risen. That's what we celebrate on Easter. Miss Fannie took the pink straw out of its round box and put it on, even though she was wearing her oldest house dress and with the torn pocket. She looked in the mirror and sighed. In her heart, she did not want to give her hat away. Not at all. She took a deep breath and repeated her favorite Bible verse. and she placed the hat back in its round box. She said, "You know, this hat really could raise a lot of money." And she put the lid on the box. She said, "Maybe it could help fix our old pipe organ." And she tied the string around the lid. She said, "Why, it could probably mend the crack in the church bell or put on a whole new roof." Suddenly she discovered she was very, very excited. Look at those cats. At the church auction, the handsome young preacher held up the pink hat with roses and looked around. "What am I bid for Miss Fannie's famous hat?" The bidding took off lickety-split. At last, here was something more exciting to bid on than a set of kitchen canisters or an umbrella stand. Bang went the gavel. "Sold to the lady in the front row." The lady in the front row gave the preacher a check and seemed very, very pleased with herself. "That's a lot of money," exclaimed Miss Wanda, who was impressed. Miss Fannie clapped her hands. It was enough to really get things fixed around here. She knew that she would not miss her favorite hat one bit, but she did wonder which hat she would wear on Easter morning. On Easter Sunday, Miss Fannie got up very early. She sat on the side of her bed and took the curlers out of her hair. Although she thought and thought, she didn't have the slightest idea which hat she would wear. Her red felt with the big feathers was too hot. Her green velour with the fancy pin was too wintry. And there was no use to even think about the pink straw, which of course would have been just right. When it was time to leave for church, Miss Fannie looked beautiful. She was wearing her best dress, which is the color of pale green apples. She was also wearing her best jewelry, her best gloves, and a white corsage. "It's time to go," said Miss Fannie, picking up her cane and taking Miss Wanda's arm. Miss Wanda could not believe her eyes. Her mama was going out the door without wearing any hat at all. She'd never done that before. Did you hear that she was wearing a white corsage? What is that? Do you know what that is? It's a flower that you wear on you can wear it on your dress or on a bracelet. They put a flower and then they wear it on a wrist. That's called a wrist corsage. And women wear them on very fancy occasions or special occasions. Men can wear them too, but they're not called corsages. They're called boutonnieres. Now that is a really funny word. You guys try that one. Boutonniere. Okay, so she's going to church without a hat. When they arrived at church, Miss Fannie couldn't believe her eyes. On either side of the freshly painted church, someone had planted beds of glorious pink roses. Pink roses were also planted along the walkway, under the stained glass windows, and in front of the old fence by the street. "Oh, Mama," said Miss Wanda, "it looks just like your pink hat." The handsome young preacher greeted them on the steps and gave each one a big hug. "We hoped you're pleased, Miss Fannie. We were able to patch the bell and fix the organ, and your beautiful hat made it possible to buy all these roses." As Miss Fannie laughed with delight, they didn't see an old woman at all. What they saw was a young girl with hair as soft as the feathers of a dove. Now, when people pass the little white church, they think they're seeing a garden of dazzling pink roses. But what they're really seeing is Miss Fannie's hat. And it will always, always be her favorite. I hope you liked Miss Fannie's hat. And I hope you've learned some new words and maybe a phrase of diddly squat. What do you think that means? Diddly squat. Think about it. Bye-bye.